Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to the book launch of Rethinking Adult Career Development. I'm Dr. Laura Bierema, and I'm a professor at the University of Georgia in the program of Adult Learning, Leadership, and Organization Development. And I'm just delighted to welcome you here and appreciate your interest in the book. And I am looking forward to sharing it with you. Today, I'm joined by two important guests, Dr. Julie Gedro and PhD candidate Eunbi Sim, and I will introduce them more fully in a few moments. So here is our agenda for our time together. We have approximately 1 hour and we'll accomplish these four things. You might notice a QR code on the slide, and I will flash this up again at the end, but that is access to all of the slides if you have an interest in having a copy of them with references of anything cited at the end, of course. So we will introduce our colleagues and present a little overview of the book. We'll have a brief dialogue among our panelists here, and then we'll entertain your questions. And Eunbi, did you have a question? I saw your hand.
Yes. So could you please swap the displays?
Sorry?
Could you please swipe the displays? Yeah, stop.
I don't understand.
Because it is not a presentation site. So
oh, it's not? Huh.
Yeah, so if you click the swap displays right after tips, like
let's see here.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, next tips, you can see the swap displays.
I don't see the swap, sorry.
Next to the tips I can see. So you should like add this. Yeah, that.
This?
Yeah, and then next to the tips, you can see.
Oh, I see. Next. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I don't usually use what, is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
My apologies. Always learning something. Okay, so that's what we're up to for today. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so Gillibo's quote, "It's better to be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb than the top of one you don't," has been a guiding mantra for me throughout my career. And it was long before I wrote this book that I just sort of memorized this and would think about it whenever I was struggling with career choices or options, or if I was coaching other people. And it really helped me make a decision to leave a position as an associate dean in the College of Education at the University of Georgia, where I'd been an associate dean for almost 4 years. And I voluntarily left that position because it just wasn't the ladder I wanted to climb. And I returned to faculty and had a chance to really have a renewed sense of my research. I formed the UGA Graduate Certificate in Coaching, and it's just been a really great acquaintance, I guess, with my career path, with my original career path, that is before I left corporate America. And so this book was written with this spirit of helping people figure out which career ladder they want to climb and to provide a lot of support for those individuals and the people who are helping them. All right, so we're going to move on to introductions of our panelists. And a couple housekeeping items. This is a webinar, and so we will have time for questions and answers at the end. And you can use the Q&A function that you'll find on your Zoom screen or the chat. We'll be monitoring both of those. And we're just so delighted to see you all here. All right, so you see our panelists on the screen here, and I am going to introduce Julie and Eunbi, and then Julie's going to give you a brief introduction of me. So I am thrilled that my friend, colleague, and partner in leading the Academy of Human Resource Development as president-elect myself and president during the pandemic, as a matter of fact, of Academy of HRD is with us today, Dr. Julie Gedro. And I could spend the next hour telling you what a wonderful human, scholar, and Yorkie mom and rescuer she is. But I would need more time than that. Julie and I met when she was finishing up her PhD at the University of Georgia. I was a newly minted assistant professor there, and we immediately clicked. And over the years, we have collaborated, commiserated, coached, and consoled each other. And everyone needs somebody like Julie in their corner. And Julie has had an impressive corporate HR career before she shifted into higher education, where she's been equally, if not more, successful. Currently, Dr. Gedro is Dean of the School of Business at Empire State University of New York, SUNY. And Dr. Gedro's most noteworthy HRD contribution is the leadership she has provided as a scholar of LGBTQ identity and other marginalized identities, and the inroads she has created as a scholar for practical inquiry and scholarship in this still rather unstudied area. Dr. Gedro was one of the first, if not the first, scholar to publish in HRD journals on LGBTQ workplace issues, and she continues to actively research, write, and teach in this area. And I'll tell you a bit more in a little while why I invited Julie to write the foreword to the book and share in the launch. All right, Eunbi Sim is a PhD candidate at the University of Georgia in my program. And when Eunbi became a PhD student during the pandemic, she and I were mistakenly assigned to each other, and she began to work with me as a graduate research assistant. And we decided we just let it be for a semester and then sort things out later. But as it turned out, it was a fortuitous error because we are very aligned in our philosophies and research interests. And so she has become an absolutely wonderful collaborator, doing critical intersectional feminist research, that's a mouthful, this early in the morning, co-teaching and seeking funding with me. And truly, I cannot keep up with Eunbi. She is inventive and always working on a manuscript or research project in addition to her dissertation. We've enjoyed collaborative and productive work together, and I'm really excited for her future career in HRD as a scholar. She will be on the job market in 2025. Little plug for my colleague, Eunbi. And I'm really indebted to her for her editing and APA skills. And Eunbi has helped edit and proofread 2 books, and I can't thank her enough. And I'm really thrilled to have her good editorial eyes on both of these projects and many others. And I'll turn things over to Julie for a brief introduction.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. It's a joy to be here. And with the permission of the author, I'm going to offer my introduction in the way of some of the excerpts from the foreword that I had the privilege to be invited to write. So, and it was a joy to offer the foreword for this important book because it offers a lifeline for career developers and career seekers and searchers and those who want to take a deep dive into adult learning and career development. So Laura's identity is comprised of many majoritarian aspects, such as her status as a full professor at a large research institution. In the foreword and in this webinar, I want to offer some insight into Laura Bierema that might not be so obvious. Laura has a reflex to use her power in order to reach back or sideways to offer support for people who might not have power. And I've known you, Laura, for some 2 decades, as you said, and I've seen you do this in many different ways. And this book is one of the latest ways. It's certainly not the only piece of work you've done to help others. I think you put a one-stop resource in the reader's hands to examine career models and theories. And one of the many things I love about the book is you put tools such as checklists to provide tangible guideposts to put into reflection planning and implementation. And Laura's a humble person, so permit me to take the opportunity to share with everyone here some of Laura's giftedness in action, because it adds further credence to how Laura walks the talk. It was under Laura's presidency of the Academy of Human Resource Development that the pandemic occurred. And under Laura's leadership, the board and others in conference leadership roles navigated through the complex decisions regarding the necessary changes for the change of the format and venue for the conference. And it was under President Bierema's leadership that the conference shifted to a virtual format. Immeasurable and in tangible ways, the transition was a success within a crisis. I will stop there. The foreword is in the book. Again, with permission, I wanted to foreground some of who I've experienced Laura Bierema to be, how wonderful of a person, scholar, leader, someone who's very committed to helping other people. So it's a joy and a privilege to be here. And the last thing that I'd like to, offer is that Laura is one of a very few people who actually have an award named after them, which is the Laura Bierema Excellence in Critical HRD Award, which honors a critical HRD or scholar practitioner who's demonstrated research and activism within the field. So Laura, I cannot thank you enough for your friendship and being a colleague.
Well, thank you, Julie, Dr. Gedro. You know, the feeling is mutual, and it's been really a privilege to have you as a collaborator and friend and supporter all these years. And certainly Julie's leadership in AHRD that preceded me really queued up the organization to weather the pandemic. So I think it's the lineage of leaders that create the launch pad for good things to happen in all organizations. So thank you, Julie. I will also mention in the photos, we were all in Lisbon, Portugal, in June, attending the UFHRD conference, University Forum of Human Resource Development. And, it's a very special organization. I was really thrilled to be there and see wonderful colleagues, and it's just a great space for collegiality and meeting great people who will support you in careers. All right, so let's move on. And what I'm going to do next is share an overview of the book. And so this is the cover of the book, and my publisher has told me it will be out in mid-July, and that is as much detail as I can get. So we scheduled the launch today with the hopes that the book will be out by Monday, and certainly hope you will support the book and tell others about it and perhaps buy it. And we do have a 50% off discount code that's good till Monday that we'll share with you in a little bit. Okay, so just a little bit about the book. I wrote it with specific people in mind. And so you'll see throughout the book that when I talk to you as a career explorer, sustainer, or changer, I use those words throughout the book, realizing that some people are exploring new options. Others are happy where they are, sustaining their career, and others want to make a change. And then it was also written for the people who help career explorers, sustainers, and changers. And those are really human resource development people. And so I tried to speak in a voice to all of those individuals and think that the book should have wide appeal for that particular audience. It was also written from a human resource development and adult education stance. This picture is from the 2020 conference in Atlanta of the Academy of Human Resource Development with some of our ambassadors. So these are practitioners, scholars, and students in the field. And some of my favorite individuals are in this photograph. And I think it does set the book apart because it is written for our field. And certainly Kim McDonald and Linda Height were the first, I think, in the most recent times to write a book. I know there have been some previous ones earlier in the history of HRD. And of course, Dr. Gedro has also contributed to the literature from an HRD perspective, but clearly grounded in these two fields. And it is not a comprehensive theory book for adult learning or career development, but it does feature relevant theories for human resource development and adults. So it's daunting to try to even digest all of the theory and career development. And so what's included in this book is what I feel is relevant to the work that we do. And it also advocates that experiencing a satisfying, affirming career should be a norm and a human right. And this is a quote, I believe it's how I start the last chapter. And that, you know, careers shouldn't just be something achievable by privileged people in the world, that no matter your education, your community, your history, your positionality, if people desire to work or have a career, then I do think that there is a moral and ethical obligation of educators, helpers, communities, organizations to help people find satisfaction and sustainability in meaningful work. And then a quote that really struck me is this Alice Walker quote, and I think it's really relevant to careers. So I also kept this in mind. Most people give up their power by thinking they don't have any. And although I'm not naive enough to believe that people have all power in their careers and can do great things, is most workers have the power of choice where they work, and to a lesser extent, maybe how they work. And those who don't have choice are usually in what I would call bad jobs that pay low or minimum wages. They don't have benefits, and they have no learning and development or opportunities for advancement. And then those cases, I think it really does become the role of teachers and communities to help people get the education and learning that they need to launch into a sustainable career that has opportunities for learning and growth. But I think this book is written with the idea that people have choices to make, and hopefully it has tools to help people make good choices. So here are the contents of the book that give you a sense of the 9 chapters that make it up. I've already mentioned, I think that it's grounded in adult learning and HRD. It also takes a critical intersectional approach to career development. And so this is probably in a way that it's a little different from some of the more mainstream career development books. I think Julie's also takes a critical approach and her work around identity. And adult learning and change are actually the vehicles through which career development occur. Something I feel like I've contributed to the career literature in this book is the chapter on connecting career development with meaning in life and work. And this has been some work I've done for the last decade or so in the coaching certificate, where we really work at UGA to try and understand how people derive purpose and meaning out of their work and life, and then how that can help them identify coachable issues and find more satisfying life and work. And then there are 2 chapters devoted to career challenges and interventions at 7 and 8, where chapter 7 does look at particular positionalities such as gender, race, physical ability, LGBTQ, and age, and among others, to understand what unique career challenges these populations have. Although, I think we have to also realize in chapter 8 that no matter your positionality, people have career challenges, and interventions can be appropriate, across positionalities and intersectional identities. And so the chapter 8 is really shifting the focus away from positionality and identity to thinking about how do interventions work for anyone who's, for instance, facing job loss, or moving into a new leadership role, or trying to get promoted, or shifting careers altogether. And then finally, the last chapter introduces a model, which I will say a little bit more about in the next slides. So something else that this book does is centers identity. And, this is really why I wanted Julie to write the foreword, and also to invite her here today, is because her book that came out in 2017 has been so meaningful and powerful to me in terms of helping shape the way I think about career development. And we've got a quote here from her that really, I think, zones in on the idea of intersecting identity and how it's important that we think about how that can present opportunity and challenge for people in careers. And Julie, did you want to say anything here? I'm off my script. Or do you want to wait until the next slide?
All right. You're doing great.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to you. So the other thing about this book is it views career development as a lifelong learning and development process. And again, we're looking at adults. Most career development books are written for teenagers, and pre-adults who are trying to figure out, what do I do when I grow up? And we already assume people have made that decision. It might not have been a good one. It might be the wrong one. They might want to make a different one, but we're really focused on the lifespan in this book. And then here are what I see as the unique contributions, which I think I've already talked about. And maybe the other thing I'll say is that every chapter has tools that are immediately applicable. And those are available in these feature boxes for reflection and application of career development theory and practice. So there's an overview in every chapter. There are boxes containing reflective activities that allow career explorers, sustainers, or changers to think about things, or their helpers. And then adult career development by the numbers, sort of the statistics on careers. And for example, you may or may not know that the average adult will change careers 7 times in their lifetime. So that data is captured there. And then tips and tools for career development and things that might be useful to try or learn as you make these decisions and navigate career life. All right, so the final chapter of the book introduces intersectional feminist career development. And it introduces 2 principles. And another reason I wanted Julie here is in her 2017 book, she identified the principle of career cost and career identity capital and career identity cost. And then the other principle is career headwinds and career tailwinds. And we'll explain both of these next. So identity capital was introduced by Cote in 1996 from a sociological perspective, with the proposal that people invest in who they are within their particular social context, and that whatever investment they make is both socially visible and invisible. So for instance, if you decide to pursue graduate school, that's a socially visible investment in your future. What may be less visible is, some of the work that you're doing to do additional research or publish or attend conferences or to forge collaborations that might not be so visible, or how you are changing in your own identity as a graduate student. I found when I graduated with my master's all of a sudden, and I'm a first generation graduate of college, that it was an odd identity to step into because no one in my family had a master's degree. And then when I finished my doctorate, that was even perhaps more challenging to the family and community that I grew up in. So you have to kind of grow into those shoes and that identity. But this identity capital serves as what Cote called a passport to enter and advance in certain social contexts. So, having a master's in hand allowed me to get a really great job and get on an HR fast track that would not have been available to me with just a bachelor's or no education at all beyond high school. And then this passport also helps people negotiate challenges and opportunities within a certain career context. For example, Cote, however, was talking about life, not careers. And so herein comes Dr. Gedro's wonderful contribution of the constructs of identity capital and identity cost. And so career identity capital is positionality that can confer privilege. So perhaps being white, or being a man, or being from a Western culture. And these advantages are tied to positionality. So sexual orientation, race, physical ability, and other identities. So what I really think has been interesting about this is not only Dr. Gedro's contribution of career identity, but also the notion of career identity cost, which Cote did not really speak about this at all, other than negotiation of challenges. But the identity cost is the shadow side of career identity capital. And it is the loss or marginalization due to having a stigmatized identity that is known or suspected by others. And I'm going to pause here and ask Dr. Gedro to chime in on her work here.
Oh, thank you. Try to keep this appropriately short. Aspects of identity can be facilitative depending on the geography or the industry or occupation that one's in, or even within an industry, the employer where one works. And I don't presume the way I think about the benefits of having a particular identity, that there's anything that is formulaic about it, but rather, and then with respect to the costs of identity, I don't see a formula that we could plug into and say, okay, if this, then that. But rather, I'm interested in raising awareness of benefits of certain identities, costs of certain identities, what that means to the individual. And then if one has awareness of that, to me, then one can make better, more thoughtful, more helpful decisions about screening particular employers or deciding on, would this make sense, this new field or profession, does that make sense when I think about who I am? So Laura, is that a deep enough examination? Because I also have anecdotes, vignettes in the way I approach this in my own. I'm an administrator now, so I teach a very, very small, because I love teaching. I ever want to get too far away from it if I can. So I can even give a pedagogical type of example, but maybe I'll hold that to see toward the end if that's okay. But I did try to dust over identities have benefits, and identities also come at costs. Thanks.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Julie. And I should mention, I used Julie's book when I teach career development, and in the foreword to that book, Dr. Sally Sandbrook wrote, to her knowledge, quote, "No other human resource development academic has so honestly and comprehensively articulated the complex interplay between identity, its impact on career development, and how HRD professionals might respond. It is no surprise to me that this book breaks new ground." And, I think it is a very important book in our field. And if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. And I also really think it's important that Julie is the first scholar to introduce the constructs of career identity, capital, and cost. And I see it as, a really important, if not the most important contribution of her 2017 book. And what I really appreciate about this, and especially how she goes into descriptions in the book, is that it gave me language to discuss identity and how it influences equity and inequity in careers, and that it makes sense and is easy to understand, because I think these are really complex ideas. All right, thanks so much, Julie. Then the other aspect of the model that I came up with was career headwinds and tailwinds, which are metaphors for systemic inequity. And again, metaphors to give us language to think about equity and inequity in workplace. So Dolly Chugg is a wonderful writer, and she, I believe, is a psychologist, and she's from New York University. But I have her books and really have found her work around diversity, equity, inclusion inventive. And in her book, she introduced Irving's definitions of career headwinds and tailwinds. So a headwind, if you've ever flown, internationally, you probably have heard the pilot talk about it, and they're even measured on the little flight analytics, at least on Delta, where you can see what they are. But a headwind is an invisible wind pattern that impedes progress, westward travel, in fact, and it can slow down an international flight, by an hour or more, as compared to when you flew the other direction. So it slows travel, and it forces the object or person to push harder. And so when we think about it in a career sense, it impedes career progress. And so you see this man with the umbrella fighting against the wind and other flying objects. That's a career headwind. A tailwind is an invisible wind pattern that accelerates eastward travel, or in the case of a career, it accelerates the career, and it speeds travel and helps the person propel forward. So in the photo there, you see this woman, a white woman, I might say that it looks like from the photo, who's pedaling uphill, but the wind is at her back. So she's got a little extra help, even if she is climbing a difficult career ladder, because she's got this little extra push. which might be positionality, opportunity, identity, etc. So 2 more slides on this. So I wanted to think about how these 2 concepts work together. And I see identity cost and identity capital as probably more internalized ways people make meaning of their positionality and their experience within social context. And then the career headwind or tailwind is really how they get treated in the workplace or in society, or it might be they have good luck or bad luck or opportunity or education. And then to think about how these manifest for the individual person in their career, but also their network of support or the lack thereof, the context of the organization or society context is also a part of that. And then to kind of think about how there's lots of forces that are both internal and external that influence career development. And then table 9.1 in the book, and I apologize, it's not very large print, but this is directly from the book, takes a look at it from sort of a matrix perspective and names kind of 4 different ways that people might be experiencing identity, cost or capital, and career tailwinds or headwinds. So, just for example, for somebody who has identity cost and they're facing career headwinds, that's a difficult position to be in. And so on this chart, there are some strategies here for how individuals or others can help someone who has found themselves in an unfortunate situation. So, for instance, let's say that there's a Black woman who keeps getting passed over for promotion. And, she's internalized racism. She's frustrated and, is not having any help in the organization, is contrasted with someone who might have identity and career privilege, with identity capital and a career tailwind, who has a lot of privilege. They are making advances. They hopefully can see that privilege and help others advocate for change and become allies and mentors to people in the other 3 quadrants of the model. But the chapter just explains each of these combinations of identity and career headwind or tailwind, and tries to help us think about internal and external forces that create different levels of opportunity and challenge for people in their careers. Okay, so that's a little bit about the book. And so for this part, we all prepared questions for each other since we've worked together in different capacities and have been focused on career development. I should also add that Eunbi helped me co-teach the career development course last time I taught it. So she's also done a deep dive into these concepts, not just editing the book. And we'll take a few minutes to dialogue. And so I'll start off, and then Eunbi will ask a question, and then Julie. How about that? So Julie, you finished your 2017 book on career development and identity, recommending, quote, that HRD professionals acquire a greater capacity to respond to the issues of identity, particularly when those are impediments. How do you feel the field of HRD is doing with this capacity building?
Thanks. So I think in so many ways, my sense is that we are improving and raising up aspects of identity that may have been unnoticed, marginalized, ignored. And the fact that there are critical scholars whose approaches, both in terms of their content as well as their methods, helps expand our notions of HRD scholarship. And I do see that as progress. And I'm encouraged by, for example, the types of sessions that when I look at the conference, just as an example, the conference program book, the topics that at a glance that I see over the years just are very encouraging for me, because I've seen an evolution. This is me, like my response. I've seen an evolution and expansion of these topics. And at the same time, I feel like every time I pull on a strand of identity and career, you know, there's many other threads of content to go down. And I'm working on one now that I've asked you to work with me on. So, and again, maybe if there's time during Q&A, we can talk about that. But the bottom line is, my response to that question is, it's both. There's progress, and yet there's so much more that we can do.
Thank you. All right, I'll ask a question of Eunbi, and then I'll pass the baton to her to ask a question. Eunbi, although career development is claimed as a cornerstone of HRD, it tends to be overlooked compared to learning and development and organization development. As an emerging HRD scholar, how would you like to see career development research and practice evolve in the field?
Oh, yeah. First, this is a really great question, I think. And I agree that career development has been overlooked compared to like TD, like training development and OD, organizational development. And I personally think the reason is that like TD and OD have been much focused on the performativity and profits of the organizations, which makes them like easier to focus on. So I hope that career development research and practice will receive more attention, which means that the needs and interests and identities of employees should be the main focus. And I have observed an emerging critical and intersectional perspective in the HRD field. There's a hope for the integration of identity into like career development research and practice, particularly from like critical and intersectional perspectives.
Thank you. All right, we're open now for your question.
Oh, yeah, I have a question for both of you. And first, Dr. Gedro, in your 2017 book, you emphasize it like subjectivity and note that career success is always subjective because subjective career success and objective career success are a subset of the larger subjective career success. While I resonate with and agree with your perspective, I still observe that the binary thinking in career success persists in the reality and research, with a significant emphasis on objective career success, such as promotion, salary, tenure status. So my question is, how can individuals challenge this binary perspective and highlight the role of personal agency in shaping their careers?
Thank you for that. My initial reaction to that question about the subjectivity of career success harkens back to the image that Laura, you offered in the beginning, is about the ladder against a wall. So whose ladder and whose wall are we talking about? And so I'm very committed to doing what I can to in our field to problematize the notion that one can point to what is important to someone, because someone's corner office and designated park, and I'm not disparaging anything, but like corner office, designated parking, frequent flyer miles, that might be very meaningful for someone and so fulfilling to know that they've that they're at the top of the divisional chart or the organizational chart with all the material perks that come with that. That might be so peripheral or not, like lacking in meaning to someone else who wants to dedicate their career, profession, occupation to a social justice and human rights type of activity. So I'm only bringing out two rather specific examples to tease out the notion that I would love for us to continue to problematize what success is and to suggest it's always up to an individual to determine for themselves what career success is. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. And for Dr. Bierema, as an intersectional feminist, I appreciate your definitely like critical and intersectional feminist career development model. And reflecting on table 9.1, I feel very privileged to have you as my advisor, despite facing identity challenges as a Korean woman and first generation student. And while your suggestion for individuals are very valuable, I wonder how organizations can systemically support career development for women and historically excluded groups. And additionally, how can organizations recognize the privilege in the career development of a historically privileged group and take actionable steps to address this disparity?
Thank you, Eunbi. So I'm going to put table 9.1 back up because I introduced this briefly. And so I think you're asking what leaders and organizations can do for each of these quadrants. And I do go into more detail in the book, but I think leaders have to educate themselves that the playing ground isn't even for everyone. And leaders have had privilege in their careers to advance to leadership roles. So whether or not they view it that way, it is a privileged position. And so to think about and perhaps identify, you may not always know identity cost if it's invisible, but you can see career headwinds and career tailwinds. And so I think, even asking the questions, who's getting selected for leadership development opportunities or projects that lead to advancement. And, often these decisions aren't made maliciously, but they're often racist and sexist or ableist or, heterosexist, we could go on. And so I do think leaders need to stop and pause and think about, not only who might be facing a career headwind or tailwind, but when they do see people have had career tailwinds, is it the same people who are getting them? So I think that that's important. And then I think in terms of understanding identity cost and identity capital really involves having a relationship with someone through mentoring or coaching or a supervisory relationship, to create safety and braveness to talk about these things. And I did quote a chapter that I did for Rashi Ghosh and Holly Hutchins' book on developmental relationships that looked at coaching, but there's a table in that chapter that I really love, and it's broaching levels of talking about gender and race and other positionalities. And leaders need to learn how to have conversations in generative, supportive ways. And there is a hierarchy. And, so for instance, if a leader were dismissive of the experience of someone, let's say a Black woman who felt like her idea went unheard in the meeting until a white man colleague said it, a low level of responding is saying, oh, you're just taking things too personally versus, that was clearly, a racist action. How can I support you? What do you want to do about it? Is a much more effective way of empathizing and providing allyship. I think I'm seeing more opportunities for people to learn how to be allies. And I think that's important. But I think also from an organizational level, policy, promotional and hiring practices and recruitment practices, can affect these and try to mitigate identity cost and career headwinds for people and create more opportunities for people to build identity capital and experience career tailwinds. So I do think it's a matter of policy, but it's also a matter of culture and recognizing and addressing implicit bias and things that we know we have evidence for affect people in their careers. So, I don't know that how we respond is any different, but perhaps this table and this book provides us new language and new tools to support people. And I was very clear about not just trying to fix the individual who's having career challenge, but to think about how individuals, their helpers, leaders, and organizations and communities can help everyone have more sustainable, satisfying careers. Thanks. All right, Dr. Gedro, I think it's your turn, and then we will shift to questions from the audience. So you are welcome to put those in the chat or in the Q&A.
Thank you. Laura, if you were able to, into whose hands would you put this book? So in a similar vein, if the book were required reading in a book club, Who are some of the readers and participants in your dream reading group?
Well, I hope to have written this book for anybody, but certainly people who are trying to make career decisions, and even young people. I didn't write this book for teenagers or for pre-adults and emerging adults, but I think there's helpful information in it because people start career socialization in the womb as they hear voices around them when they're babies, embryos, talking about work. So it's something we get socialized into. But I certainly think people who are career explorers, sustainers, or changers, and they're helpers. But I also hope parents would read it to help their children navigate careers. And I hope leaders, CEOs, those types of folks will read it because the book, although it has a really firm scholarly grounding and it is a scholarly book, I try hard to make my books readable and accessible, so you don't feel like you have to have a fancy degree to read it. And the exercises and boxes are straightforward and anybody can do them. So I suppose I can't be everything but the kitchen sink, but I did try to write a book that was useful for a problem that almost every adult faces in their lifetime, and child as well, as they are before they're adults. So I hope that answers your question, but I hope it has wide appeal.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Okay, well, we are going to move on then to opportunity for Q&A. So let me just move us along in our agenda, and I will take the slides down just so we can, you don't have to look at the slides, but I will put this up again before we leave. But here is the QR code for a 50% discount. This is good until Monday, so you will have to make a decision quickly if you want the book. But you can also go to the Elgar site, www.e-elgar.com, and the code is capital letters BIER 50 to achieve the discount. The QR code links you to a flyer that tells you a little bit more about the book. So we'll put this up and also the code to find the slides again one more time. But we are interested right now in talking with you and hearing what questions that you might have of any of us. So, and again, we really appreciate your time this morning and interest. I know it's summer for many of us, and you probably had other options this morning or this afternoon or evening. All right, so I do see we have some questions popping up. And I see a greeting from Ozzy, which we're always happy to see you, Ozzy. And Linda Sinisi, hi there, has written, some organizations place responsibility of career development on the employee. And how do you address ownership and roles in career development? And actually, that is a wonderful question that I do go into in great detail in the book, because I think historically, like, for example, my father, Ken, worked for an electrical utility for 40 years, and he started as a tree trimmer and finished his career as a plant maintenance supervisor, and he did not have a college degree. And he was on what I would consider to be a traditional career trajectory of, kind of that straight, slow line that goes up. If you have loyalty to the company, you'll have opportunities to advance, which he did. And that traditional career development path is really not the norm anymore. So we have lots of different ways of talking about it. For instance, the protean career, which is people are individual agents and that they need to develop expertise and really sell it like a commodity on the market to the highest bidder or to the organization they want to work in, so that there's, I think, an expectation that there's more agency of the individual. There's also hybrid models where it's sort of more balanced between the organization and the worker. And then I also dedicate the last part of one of the chapters to metaphors of careers. And there are about 11 or 12 of them in terms of metaphorically. So just one example, a legacy career. Everyone in your family's gone to medical school, so you are too, is the idea of that. Or, we hear a lot about Nepo kids, but, actors' children become actors. So that's not actually an unusual career phenomenon, because that's their socialization and exposure. And then you think of the person who says, no, mom, dad, I'm not going to become a doctor. and then there's a long pause. So it talks about some of those metaphors. But I do think organizations are foolish if they don't pay attention to career development. I think they need to create an expectation that people, are in charge of it, but they need to provide appropriate support and also address career identity and headwinds and tailwinds. So hopefully that answered your question, Linda. And I see we have another one from you, noting some organizations do not provide any career development, even though the positions in the organization are high level and mid-level and professional. And unfortunately, you've seen this in spades over 40 years, and you think some do see it as a priority and some not at all. I can say working in a public institution where funding for learning and development is more challenging than when I was in corporate. I think that even in that case, we find that, I think our leaders have found resources and provide opportunities and in some cases funding, but it does seem to be a matter of culture and leadership being tuned into this. And in fact, I'd love to hear Julie's response to this, especially as a dean of a business school. But, organizations, one little tidbit that have survived over 100 years, and there's research on this to show have invested in learning and development and are nimble and able to make change, which, I would argue is an absolute necessity in today's very complex and chaotic world. Julie, what do you think in response to this question?
The question to me comes up in response to that is, my sense is people, okay, this is like, what's next? What's next for me? Even if there's someone who wants to stay within the same organization. And I think that leaders and managers don't invest in that at your own, to me, it's like swim at your own risk. I mean, that's just my point of view, because but unfortunately I do agree with Linda that and we've written about this, it's that the responsibility is oftentimes on an individual to create a path or navigate a path for themselves, which is why one of the main reasons I'm so interested in writing and publishing and presenting about these topics. So, and I'll just say, just anecdotally, I don't even want to, I've had so many jobs in my own life that it's probably a little funny, but I just say ignore at your own risk. So I would like to think, because you said I aspire to, in formal and non-formal ways, cultivate an environment where someone in the organization can see, okay, here's my next challenge, here's my next opportunity. Again, it's aspirational, and I think we live into it a lot of the time at my university, but it's never anything that I would claim perfection about.
Thank you. All right. And then Diane Jones has asked, say more about most workers have the power of choice. I'm happy to start, but I've got two really great panelists here, and I think that sometimes people think they don't have choices. And one of the theories of career development that looks at, fit between the person and the organization, person-organization fit. And, so if there's a bad fit for the person, for instance, the choice is to leave. But the other choices are to try to work with your manager or the organization to make the fit more workable for you. So, making choices to take action or decide, this isn't working out for me. I think I want to gain more education. I was looking at a coaching scenario yesterday. I'm going through some training, and the client was a woman who had been passed over for promotion many times, and she was really frustrated. But at the end of the day, she didn't do anything her manager told her to do to get promoted, because she didn't feel like she should take on a special project if she wasn't paid for it. That's a choice. Like, I'm going to just sit here and not do what you told me. But, another person might say, well, okay, I'm going to take on this project and show people what I can do and learn some new skills. And so, I think people do have a lot more choice than to just say, well, my manager's a jerk. I'm at a dead end, and I hate my colleagues, so, I don't want to make it sound like there is that people aren't affected by the social context. But I also think adults need to realize that, if you assume you have no choice, then you've given away your power. So that's really my thinking there. I don't know, Eunbi or Julie, if you want to speak to that. All right. And Shonda, thanks for the shout out. Rashi, good to see you. And so Rashi is the parent of a teenager who is considering which major to apply for in college. I agree that this book is a fantastic resource to understand career development as a lifelong pursuit that needs to start early. How do you think your book can inform that early scope where K through 12 schools in collaboration with parents can encourage this awareness early on? I love that, Rashi. Rashi also wrote an endorsement of the book along with Carol Elliott. So my great appreciation for you and all of the great work you both do. So, one idea that comes to mind is perhaps a book club with parents and or teachers to look at this book and identify what might be helpful. I don't know, given the attention span of the young folks who consume life digitally and in small bites, it might be too much to read the whole thing, but page through the book and find some boxes that are interesting, that might have good activities to do to think about careers. And I guess this is a bias and maybe a soapbox of mine, but I have young adult nieces and nephews, who are in college, and there is so much pressure on these kids to pick a major. And my advice to them is always, this is your chance to explore and try things and learn new things. And, maybe don't be so fixated on that, but, take the assessments, figuring out what you like to do, what makes you happy and what gives you purpose in life. And, so I actually think that chapter 6 on meaning in life and work is a really important place to start, because if you know what drives you and what gives you meaning and purpose in life, you want to do work that feeds that. And I don't think we spend enough time helping people get in touch with those kinds of things. And I fully believe young people can do that as easily and maybe more easily than, an adult who's wizened by experience. Yeah. All right. And I'm paying attention because, okay, we've got 2 minutes. So let me just scan through. Oh my gosh, I love all these questions. And we may have to just take these questions and just send you all some written responses to some of these, as we don't have enough time. But I appreciate some of the nice comments in the Q&A. And so Renato has asked, do you cover the fluid nature of careers where academia, corporate roles, volunteering, and personal passions intersect and shape our professional identities, and that often becomes an issue for us in academia to decide our career choices and shaping what is part of tenure or other aspects of professional identities? And certainly, yes, I do talk about the fluidity and change of careers. It's not necessarily a tenure handbook, but I think it has helpful advice. But for those of you who are on a stressful promotional trajectory like tenure or a fast track position or hoping for one, one day I overheard 2 professors talking at a conference, and we were in a stairwell and people were moving from like a keynote to lunch. So it was crowded and it was moving slowly. So, and I was by myself, but I started listening to these 2 professors in front of me, and they were complaining about the tenure and promotion process. And I was an untenured assistant professor. And it was sort of like, no, my tenure struggle was bigger and worse than yours, because they just kind of kept like, like people talk about how busy they are. And in that moment, I thought, I never want to be like that. And so there's a quote that many of you've probably heard is, are you living your life or is your life living you? And I thought, I am driving tenure. Tenure is not driving me. And I can do other things. And, and I think you have to have a healthy relationship with advancement, because it is stressful. It can cause you to totally lose sight of what's really important in life. I interviewed somebody recently who was an incredibly remarkable, successful academic. And when she retired, she had to learn, she told me how to take a real vacation, that all of her travel was to conferences and in professional mode, and like learning how to re-identify who you are. And so I do think you have to be in relationship and conversation with yourself in this thing you are trying to do, and decide, what your research agenda is going to be. But, for me, my research agenda is my life. Everything I do in my life, the causes I donate money to and serve on boards of, are related to, learning and development and social justice. So you do have to decide that. Okay. And we are out of time. So we will respond to the other ones. I am going to put my slides up one more time to just flash the book discount code up, and give you a chance to also see the, let's see here. All right, how are we, Eunbi? All right, I'm just going
We
to,
can see the code, but it would be great to swap the displays again.
okay, I know how to do that now. How's that?
Oh,
All right.
it's still,
Okay, so here's the book discount code for 50% off until this Monday. So I encourage you to purchase the book if you would like. And then one last thing is, can advance the slides here. The references with one more link to the presentation is here. And I want to thank you so much for being here and for your support of this book and your colleagueship throughout my career. I've had a lot of wonderful relationships and support, and I appreciate you all being here today. And so with that, we thank you. And I hope to hear from you. I hope to hear your feedback on the book, and have a great day or evening. Thank you so much. Andy, see, I'm going to stop recording here.